It did not even take me an hour, not a single hour, for me to realize that Lies of P is a straight copy-paste slash ripoff of Bloodborne, Sekiro, and even Dark Souls all combined. It is so blatantly obvious that the minute you pick up the controller, you'll know where to go, what to do, and how to play. All the instincts will come rushing back like you're playing some new FromSoft game that just got released. And you know what? I absolutely love it. Now, I want to upfront with the obvious. Within the first hour, not even that, you're going to feel identical to the Souls-like Bloodborne or anything that FromSoft has made. Literally, I'm playing on a PS5 controller, and the minute I picked it up, all the controls were exactly where I thought they would be. The way I move is exactly the way I thought would be. Where enemies are placed is exactly where I thought they would be. Just obvious instincts on corners and such, the way you pick up items, or even funnier, the animations. It's not about copied mechanics, it's literally animations. Look at this backstab! Oh, you can. Okay, wait, it's identical! Wait, it's literally identical! Wait, it's one-to-one. Borrowing mechanics is one thing for sure, but let's be frank here, it is a one-to-one copy in the way it is executed, the effects it has in the game itself, and then the studied animation. It is kind of wild, but it is one-to-one. Now, I need to make something clear. I'm a huge From Software fan. One of my first games was literally Demon Souls, and then thereafter that, Dark Souls 1 on release, Dark Souls 2 on release, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, you guys get the idea. Sekiro, everything. I've played everything multiple times, attempted speedruns, beat everything, different builds. You get it. I'm a nerd when it comes to these things. So that's where I'm coming from. Yet still, From Software is a multi-million-dollar company. I don't really care if someone's going to copy them. This is not to defend the Souls series. It's just to call it out because it is a little bit of a funny thing, and then realize that it is a mixture of a ton of copy-paste across the Souls series. For example, the perfect block and the way it's executed and the way it moves into combat does feel slightly like Sekiro. The overall design of the world, the tone, the way you heal does feel a lot like Bloodborne. Then the enemy designs, bosses particularly, definitely feel very Souls-like. Then there's of course the main mechanics like the hub, very similar to the round table, or the nexus, the way what you do in the hub, of course, I don't want to call her a maiden, of course, but the main girl that you upgrade through, the way that you even teleport, the way you kind of like fade away and you first go on your knees, like the animation copying is kind of crazy. The visceral attacks from the front like Bloodborne, but then the way you can backstab like the Souls, it just adds up. It keeps adding up over and over, and no matter what, you feel, I can't say you feel like right at home, you just feel like you're playing a From Software game. It's crazy. Then there's the level design that's studied to the T. It's crazy that I, for the first run, while playing this game, can instinctively know there might be a ladder there, or a gate that will lead me back to the spawn, like right here. And it was just instant. It took 2 seconds to realize before I even touched it, I'm like, oh, that's gonna lead me back to where I started. And surely it did. The amount of, it's like, the way it's copied is basically borderline impressive because From Software has been doing this for quite some time now, so they've been able to polish it over time. They've learned from their mistakes. While this game, this developer, it's their first attempt, yet they've studied it so well and analyzed From Software so well that they've come out with quite a polished product off of the gate to the point that Souls veterans know what to do instinctively. They've tapped into our instincts. They've tapped into our habits from a completely different game, yet we can use them here without thinking too much. That is impressive. Now, this game is not without its flaws, and we'll get to that, but in this first segment, it was all about correlation to the Souls game because, let's be honest, it's everyone's first instinct. Now, to speedrun tap into other Souls-like games because it's people's first reaction to my statement there is, well, what about Neo or other games? Like, there are other Souls-like games, and you're right, I have played them, and they do tap into some instincts like base mechanics, what a bonfire will be, what I should kind of look for, how to navigate the menus, and the basics of combat. But when it comes to timing and the way you go around fighting, nothing has come quite as close to copy-paste as this game in my personal experience. Before we get into the specific uniqueness of this game, I do want to cover the flaws of copying mechanics this closely. One of the biggest ones is because you have an amalgamation of different mechanics copied, you kind of have a mismatching of quality to some degree. For example, Sekiro is all about countering, parrying, moving fast, and playing aggressively against your opponent. Bloodborne is second to that in the sense that you can heal back when you play aggressive, and it is also about continuously moving. Then there's a lot of the more traditional Souls-like things where it's a lot bigger, slower swings into different timings. Sometimes they speed up, sometimes they slow down. You have these magnificent large bosses that you have to play with or beat, and this game kind of puts them all together where it doesn't always work. For example, let's say you have an extremely large boss. It can be frustrating because perfect blocking is still a very important mechanic since you can't negate all damages just by blocking, meaning if their attack comes from somewhere off of screen, it's going to be hard to time it, meaning your instinct is to make sure you can negate some damage. And since it doesn't negate all the damage, it can start to feel a little bit frustrating. That's what happens when you start mix-matching mechanics without too much cohesiveness. That's where we see the biggest holes in this game. For example, Sekiro, all about countering, can double down on making sure that that system is the best it could possibly be. Any large attack that could come out of nowhere sometimes has some sort of symbol. For example, the Mikiri counter has a symbol as well as a sound cue for us to learn timings regardless of camera movement, FOV, etc. Or when you're fighting the Guardian Ape and he jumps into the sky, look at a multiple things. 1, the camera follows. 2, we get a symbol. 3, there's a sound cue, allowing you to actually learn patterns in a much more fair and fun manner. As Lies of P can kind of come out of nowhere and you gotta be a lot more patient, and panic blocking makes you still take damage. Now, I can't fault them too hard because this is their first game, and I do hope they make another and improve upon the current systems, because as of right now, this game shines the most when you are playing against level-headed bosses or human-sized bosses that are the exact same size as you. This is just because then the fight has a lot more clarity than the much larger bosses. Now, it's okay, it's not a detrimental issue, it just adds a layer of frustration that doesn't at least perfectly feel fair. Is it fair? Maybe I'm just not good enough, and that's okay. It's just an observation that I personally made. But this game has a layer of specialty on its own. To say it doesn't introduce some fun mechanics would be wrong. Some unique and some specifically fun. For example, your little blue bar in the top left corner is fun. Getting those really strong parries off and insane combos, as you can see here, is addicting. This moment here, when I just comboed this boss, look how much health I chunked out, felt like pure skill and satisfaction. Man, did I love this. Did I love this, love this, love this. And this is cool. This is, to me, a lot of people compare this to Bloodborne and Dark Souls. Am I crazy to a little bit compare it to Sekiro? This type of counter that you could just chunk away at a boss. It's like perfect blocking or perfect parrying into a string of attacks. Like, this doesn't come from traditional Souls-like. It does come from a little bit of Sekiro. But because the rest of the influence is traditional Souls-like in the way the bosses are designed, in the way that the speed of the combat works, that's when the blue bars, or what they call the Fable slots, come into play. They are completely unique to this game, and the way that they function is completely unique to this game. It's a function that I would say is fun and a little bit addicting. When it comes to your hand, I'm not gonna lie, like the left hand, it is kind of like Sekiro again. I don't know why more people aren't calling out Sekiro, but either way, it is a very fun mechanic to have in a more traditional style of combat for this game. Like, using that hand against very much larger bosses that fight like Dark Souls bosses is addicting, and it brings something new to us that we haven't got to really try before. Furthermore, there are some mechanics that are quote-unquote unique, but not really functional in a fun way. Some people may disagree, but like the sharpening of the sword, the concept is kind of cool. I like the animation. I like how you sharpen your sword and such, but having to kind of keep yourself aware of that for mid-boss fights just feels like it kind of breaks rhythm. That's just the best way I can put it. In the first boss, when I kind of had to learn the downtime, I'm like, okay, downtime is now back up and sharpen your sword a bit so it doesn't break mid-fight. Maybe that's like an extra layer of difficulty, and to some extent it is. It's a layer of studying and patterns, which people will find addicting, and I don't hate it yet, but then I just can't help but feel like maybe it's just pulling me out of the fight for kind of no reason other than to just pull me out. You know, I'm still very mixed feeling on it, and I don't know how much I like it. And when you're just mid-level, you just gotta stop and sharpen it. You're just breaking rhythm, right? To me, it's anti-quality of life, no matter how I put it. Another big plus for this game is the way you can customize your weapons and the styling of these weapons. I'm not going too into depth because you've probably already realized if you made it this far, this video is supposed to be spoiler free. A lot of people want opinions without really getting spoiled, so it's only early game, it's only your first weapon. I haven't shown off too much, and that's for purpose. I just don't want to spoil for anyone who doesn't want to be spoiled. Truth is though, if I were to dive into every single mechanic, every single enemy, every single boss, we're going to get to a point where this video will drag on to be like an hour long. I'm trying to hit the big main points just for now to kind of get an overview on how these two compare and how this copycat still feels very fun and polished to play. It is a good game so far. I haven't beat it yet, I should make that clear, but so far it is a fantastic game with, sure, a little too much copying, but polished up enough to the point where I don't really care that it's just a ripoff, as if another company just did From Software's job for them into getting us a Souls game in between waiting for From Software's next Souls games. It's a nice gap filler that's quite enjoyable. Now, if you've played it, let me know what you agree or disagree with, and I'm probably going to make more in-depth video in the future.